Hello, and welcome to Best Practices Revealed, the Secret to Always-On Availability, a webcast sponsored by Infrascale and presented by Virtualization and Cloud Review. I'm Tracy Cook, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to take care of a couple of housekeeping details. We encourage you to ask questions. Please type your questions into the Ask a Question box on the console at any time during the presentation. We'll address as many of your questions as we can during the live event. Any questions that we can't get to will be answered by Infrascale after the event via email. The entire webcast is being recorded and will be archived for future viewing, and you can access the replay tomorrow using the same link that you used today. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Derek Wood, VP Product Marketing of Infrascale. Derek has 10 years of experience in data protection and disaster recovery technology. He has in-depth experience with disaster recovery as a service, business continuity, and ransomware mitigation strategies while serving as Infrascale's VP of Product Marketing. He's a popular presenter and well known for his leadership and expertise in IT resilience and secure cloud storage systems. So we're in great shape today, and Derek, I'd like to pass it over to you. Please take it away.
Thank you. What an introduction. So welcome everyone to our session. We are going to talk about the secret to always-on availability. And the big shift in this is, companies looking at their security policies, and part of the security policy including your backup and DR plans. So we'll discuss the difference between backup and DR, the technology landscape and how it's been evolving and what people are looking at and need today. And then, hopefully when we show you how we address all those options, you'll have some more questions that we can answer to make sure that it's a good fit for you, or any questions you might have about, what are some things you might want to look for. And then hopefully we'll see you as one of our customers in the future. So here's me. You can add me on LinkedIn, DR Wood. R is the middle name, not a title. And the agenda is pretty simple. So we're going to go through data loss and downtime and explain how we go about those items and how those items differ, what your best mitigation plan should be or can be, and then again, how we will handle that. So the first part is just to kind of discuss the landscape of the technology that we've had available for the last 15, 20 years and how it's evolved. And we're generally going to do this based on recovery time. So this is going to be a focus on mitigating downtime. How do you reduce your downtime as low as possible in the event that something does go wrong? And then generally, like most markets, as the performance of the technology is better, usually the cost goes up. So to begin with, we have tape backup systems. Almost everyone here is pretty familiar with tape. From a capital expenditure point of view, the cheapest storage on the market. From an operational perspective, using this for recovery time, very, very slow, quite manual, lots of steps, lots of issues, and so on. And then you came in the mid-2000s, and cloud backup came to bear. And cloud backup had a bit of an increase in capital expenditure, but at a much more flexible service that allowed you to better protect all points of data rather than just a server, because it's software based. And you also had faster recovery time where you could recover no matter where you were. You didn't have to go, plug and pull a bunch of tapes. Then you have appliance-based backup. So this is hardware that would be dedicated to processing backup procedures. And this is great for, environments that are starting to get a little larger. You're looking 50 plus employees, still in that SMB space. And now you do have some hardware to manage. And then you have this big gap. And actually this curve should be a big curve at this point. So you notice it goes from appliance backup to cold site DR for disaster recovery. The big difference in a backup versus a disaster recovery solution is that backup is going to be primarily concerned with avoiding data loss or mitigating data loss. So can you recover it? Yes. Disaster recovery answers the question, how quickly can you recover it? And one of the biggest hurdles in your recovery plan is going to be finding a place to recover your environment. So that's where DR is the big difference. So when you have cold site DR, that means there's going to be a near duplicative set of hardware or some environment where you can recover and you don't have to first go provision it. Whereas with the backup system, it's, well, you can recover the data, but it's up to you to answer the question of to where or to what. And a lot of times that's going to result in, needing to rush out and purchase new hardware and new machines, whatever it is. And this is where, in this line between DR and backup becomes very expensive because that duplicative hardware cost, your capital expenses, it's increased and doubled your monitoring costs. So you have to, monitor that hardware, make sure that it's going to be ready. The testing, it gets very complicated and very expensive very quickly. And then warm site DR and hot site DR, and these are just completely out of affordability for the general SMB and even up into the SME market. So, once you get up to 2,000 employees plus, which is generally the SME ceiling, even environments of that size can find these DR systems cost prohibitive. What Infrascale has done is we've used our expertise in cloud computing to provide a near hot site DR recovery time at the total cost of ownership of something comparative and typically we found to be less than an offsite tape backup solution. And the reason is because we've leveraged the cloud so that you don't have the operational expenses. It's simpler to use. You don't have the additional hardware expenses. That's where the as a service part comes in. So DR is you got to buy hardware, you got to pay for the management and monitoring and all that stuff. The DR as a service or DRaaS includes all of that. It wraps it all up into a nice little package that's easy to consume and easy to manage. Now, when you look at these technologies and you think, well, what do we need? This is really expensive. Can we just get the cheapest thing that we need? Before you can even make that decision, it's really important to understand the cost of downtime for your particular business, and then even down to particular business units, depending on how geographically spread your organization is. The cost of downtime is important because everything's relative. If I buy, a cheap $50 pair of headphones, I'm not going to pay for, an extended warranty that costs $50. I'll just buy a new cheap pair of headphones when they die. But if I bought something really expensive and it's $1,000 server, I would gladly pay maybe $200 to insure that for an additional few years. So everything's relative, and without knowing your cost of downtime, which is a combination of your hard expenses, so your operational costs, which includes everything, money going out of your business to keep it running, that's rent, salaries, hourly wages, all this stuff. And then you have your opportunity costs, which is, how much money are you making? And then how is that impacted by downtime? And these can be very difficult things to calculate, but they're done quite often. Every insurance company does this for you. So you already have that information somewhere, I'm sure, if you have business insurance. And this is going to justify how much effort and time you should put towards a plan that either eliminates downtime, data loss, or both. And that's how you can decide which is more appropriate for your environment. And then again, specifically for different parts of your organization. By different parts of your organization, we have kind of a structure where you have your central servers, your central infrastructure, and this is critical stuff. And that's what everyone thinks of when you think about backup. We got to back up these servers. But when we look at the real impact of having a full organization, you have workers creating data at endpoints. They're not just logging into a server to create data. So that whole promise of that system really kind of stuck in libraries where everyone just logs onto the server, but it just doesn't work because today workers are typically spread geographically, lots of remote workers, remote offices. So how do you have a solution that protects all of the data that the business is paying to be created? It's important to protect all these assets. And then you add in the hybrid infrastructure movement, which we've seen already. The hosted exchange started years and years ago. But now we're seeing big moves into Office 365, SharePoint Online, all these other systems that are now no longer tangible assets, right? It's all on somebody else's hardware. But just because it's not running on your hardware doesn't mean that you don't need to address a backup or DR solution, because the providers certainly aren't. It's not part of their policy. It's not what they give you. So you have, generally you see a business, and if they do have a backup in place, which still there are estimated about 35% of all SMBs in the country don't have any type of backup at all. Those that do may look something like this. And that's largely because it's cost prohibitive. You may need many different vendors to cover all those points of data. You know, a vendor that does DR for your central servers to eliminate that downtime very well may not have an option to address your endpoints or your off-network devices, and vice versa. So you're really looking at, you know, the added cost and expense of managing multiple vendor relationships, multiple support workflows. In the event of a disaster, you really don't want to have to go to 4 or 5 different vendors to get help in recovering. You really hope that you can, you know, just stick with one, and that would be ideal. And that's in the case that you can't use it yourself or just want additional assistance. And with Infrascale, that's what we've done. So our DNA is in, again, cloud software as a service. So we launched with a software-based cloud backup tool, which is at the bottom, which you can use very easily to deploy across entire workforces, whether they're on-site or off-site. There's also, for remote offices, there's bare metal backup built into the cloud backup tool, so that you could do, you know, some basic bare metal backup jobs to speed up the recovery of those machines. Also some native support for, you know, humble SQL databases and Exchange databases. And then you have Infrascale DR, which is disaster recovery as a service. It's our flagship. And this is an appliance-based system, or it's a hybrid system with an appliance on-site that replicates off-site. And this is where you get our 15-minute restore time guarantee. And then you have Infrascale Cloud Application Backup, which is a new thing that we've launched this last year. And it allows you to protect your hosted applications and the hosted data. So Office 365, Box, Google Suite, SharePoint Online, all of these things that are being used either officially or unofficially that you still need to be able to protect, because again, those are assets that the business is paying people to create, and to not protect them could put the business at risk. So again, here's the kind of rundown, and we're going to distribute the slides after this. But again, Infrascale Cloud Backup, Cloud Application Backup, and Disaster Recovery. What's nice about these systems is that it also lets you move into this solution according to your current plans. So if you have an endpoint protection solution in place, but you need that to recover, you can get started with the DR piece and then add in the cloud backup or the cloud application backup later. If it's the opposite, if you have maybe an older tape system and you just need to wait for those systems to die so that you can, you know, quote unquote, get your ROI out of it, or just end the contract, then you could start with the cloud backup pieces and the cloud application backup and add them together. So we don't force you to rip and replace your tactics and how you go about providing business continuity to your organization. We give you the option to improve upon it in a staged kind of milestone project that would work for you, whether it's financial or contractual or just general approval. So again, our mission is, and we'll say this throughout the presentation, is to eradicate downtime and data loss, so 2 problems, for businesses of all sizes, and to do this affordably. So when you have our DR solution set up, the way it works is you have a bunch of users, they're working on their machines, and all those connect to the server, and the backups are running from the production environment to our appliance, and then it gets replicated to the cloud. And then suddenly a server goes offline, whether it's ransomware or some other issue. Instead of having to go through a big discovery phase and sending people out, technicians from any location that they can access the web portal, the dashboard, can initiate a recovery of that particular database to the cloud and then rework their network to run through here while they figure out what happened on site. And so what you're doing in this scenario is, instead of having an uptime timetable that is, we've replaced the hardware, we've done all this, and the production environment is up and ready, and the time that your production environment is restored is the same time that the downtime is restored. That can be days or even weeks, depending on what's happened. What we've done is we give you the ability to recover this in the same exact method, no matter what problem has occurred. So you can end the downtime within an hour, and then you can spend the time to look at fixing your production environment. In fact, we've had partners of ours who have recovered entire businesses to our cloud because of hardware failure on site, but instead of needing to rush and buy the most available hardware, they ran in the cloud for a couple of weeks while they got the hardware they actually wanted. That's another problem that a lot of people outside IT don't understand is, these destructive moments, server downtime, whatever, can actually be quite nice for finally upgrading systems. That's often how moves from physical to virtual environments go. But if you're not given the time to properly do it, you can end up with another workaround as your production environment. And that just causes complications for the next round of recoveries that happen. So this way you end the downtime very quickly, so everyone is calm, the fire on everyone's head is put out, and then you can calmly put together a recovery in a production environment the way it should be, not the way that is the fastest way. You can also use the on-site appliance to recover. So if you wanted to, or I guess I did this a bit backwards here, you can recover on the appliance for testing purposes or for individual machines. But if you had a complete environment wipeout, you could just recover everything to the cloud. And we have this boot orchestration function, which I'll show you in a minute, that makes this much, much simpler than it had really ever been before. And we're continuing to beat down that aspect of things so it can be even more automated. Okay, so again, our mission is, when we say eradicate downtime and data loss for businesses of all sizes, when we say business, we are specific to meaning the entire business and not just servers of all sizes or endpoints of all sizes. That means that our support for operating systems, physical and virtual, is quite broad, because we want to give you the ability to not need another vendor to be a part of your data protection solution. We're not just one strategy. We can be your entire solution for everything you need, whether it's VMware, Hyper-V, a mix, application-specific, file-specific, Linux, Unix, you name it. We're going to have support for those most common flavors of operating systems and types of backups and DR scenarios. The other thing we've done is, again, we're a software company. We are not pushing hardware like traditional DR vendors have. Our business model is to be an as-a-service company. So, our 15-minute guarantee, it's based off of our cloud, and we've optimized our cloud quite a bit so that you get the advantages from a cost perspective of not having to maintain a secondary environment. But if it's for compliance reasons or because you already have your own data center, that's not a problem for us either. We can deliver you physical appliances and you can plug them in wherever you like, or we can deliver the appliances as virtual appliances, and you can deploy that on your own hardware and manage it however you need to, whether it's by compliance or preference. And this flexibility we've found to create great success. For example, we're the only provider of a CGIS compliant cloud backup and DR solution in the country. And that's because we were able to work with a CGIS compliant data center and hosting provider to get that compliance. And CGIS is for Criminal Justice Information Services, so all law enforcement agencies need to be CGIS compliant. So that's one of the many benefits of having this flexibility for you as a customer is, put it where you need to put it. We have an option for you that's nice. Here's another grid where you can kind of see the different functionalities. So as you're mapping out how you're going to deploy this information is available. But do call in, and our sales engineering team will work with you on a full deployment plan and understanding what you can and can't do. If you want to talk through milestones so that you can work it through finance better, and you want a staged approach to, first doing backup, then doing DR, that's not a problem. Just give us a call. And again, these are available on our website and will be distributed afterwards. So here's for the third time: eradicate downtime and data loss with a 15-minute failover guarantee. Now, the guarantee is quite important because it's a very difficult thing legally to guarantee. You have a lot of liability when you throw guarantees around. And if you look at the SLAs for most DR providers, they don't have enough control over all the infrastructure being used to even provide you with a SLA. So what they can do is they can give you some measurements of what they've seen tested or reported in the field, but they can't give a guarantee. Because we built out our own infrastructure, because of our expertise in cloud software development and cloud infrastructure, we can actually do this. So if you're replicating to our cloud, we guarantee that you can boot any machine that's replicated to our cloud and have it working within 15 minutes. And that's huge. When it comes to a business continuity plan or a resilience and automation plan, nothing really speaks more than a guarantee from your provider of when you'll be able to resume your business. How continuous is the business? We guarantee 15 minutes per machine. Everything that you work with is going to be found in our centralized Infrascale dashboard, whether it's cloud backup, cloud application backup, or the disaster recovery as a service. This includes a full reporting and monitoring system, so you can see how many files, how many, what your data growth looks like per device or per account. You can mass deploy across Active Directory from our dashboard, so you can build out a custom MSI and then push that through Active Directory. There's also integration with different PSAs. If you have a ticketing system that isn't supported, we've built in a rather universal support for ticketing systems so that you can export all of the monitoring events to a particular email address or web domain that then your system could process. So, the most basic would be every time we receive an email from this address, create a support ticket. The information and the way that we've structured the reporting is that you can add in rules to make that more efficient. Send warnings about endpoints to this team, send alerts about servers to this team. And you can create nice workflows so that warnings and events are addressed very quickly. Now, boot orchestration is a major improvement in recovery time. If you look at a typical recovery environment, the first thing is what failed, then why, and that'll determine if you need to put the lockdown and put a full quarantine on your network if it's a virus or something, and then you need to start looking at a recovery environment where you're going to throw it. There's maybe 10 or 15 major steps that go into a recovery. So just to recover a basic database from a backup could take maybe 4 to 6 hours if everything goes smoothly. With our ability to right-click and say boot to the cloud or boot on appliance, you can have a machine back up and running within minutes. And then you just re-network it so that the users start working through that machine, or so that your other applications are pointing to that machine instead. By default, you can recover into a test environment so it doesn't overwrite your IPs or anything like that. So you can do just as easily as testing, you can do a full recovery. Now, boot orchestration, if you say, okay, it's 4 to 6 hours per application or per server to recover. If you multiply that times how many machines your environment has, that could be days or weeks before full recovery is done, or a lot of sleepless nights for the technicians, and maybe a lot of 24-hour shift changes. With boot orchestration, you get to predefine, and our team will help you do this as well. You predefine what a full recovery would look like. So you'd start with a boot group for your Active Directory and your DHCP servers, And then you start plugging in your primary servers, so your SQL databases, Exchange, different application servers, and then you could start going on your tertiary servers. In between each group, you can have spaces where you can put delays. These delays can be useful for running scripts to further configure those devices or to run tests. And so this is completely up to you to design. We're here to help you with it. It's a drag and drop editor, so it's very simple to create. What's also nice about the boot orchestration function is that a big part of any DR, business continuity plan or general security plan, is, when was the last test you ran? Can you say that you can recover in a couple of hours or whatever it is, but have you done it? And typically, these sorts of tests aren't done very often because they're very expensive and time consuming. If we put a third party to test it, you're generally looking at about $4,000 to $5,000 in man hours to do a full site test recovery because of how long it'll take. And it also may actually require some amount of downtime to do that test. With our system, you can test individual machines whenever you like, no limit, and it takes just a few minutes. Boot orchestration, you come in here and you hit run, and it'll go through and boot all these machines, and you'll see these pop up, and then it'll actually show you a little screenshot of the login screen, and then straight from the dashboard, you can actually remote into those machines to verify that they are set up. So this takes your testing scenario from something that was generally avoided, even though it's very important, simply because of how long it took, to now something that you can do very quickly. You come up here, you hit run, you go get lunch, you come back, and then everything's going to be up and running. Or even just go get a coffee, and then a lot of things are going to be up and running, depending on the size of your environment. You can move these around, and then another nice drag and drop editor. Another nice function that was designed in the early days of ransomware is called an anomaly detection function. Now, this is an alert that, again, just identifies anomalies, things that are strange, are atypical. So there are really two scenarios that this becomes useful for you. One is suddenly you see that, Pam in accounting had, 100 or 200 gigs backed up the other day. And then it throws a warning saying, typically Pam only changes like 4 or 5 files a day, and it's, a couple hundred megs, if that. So this alerts you to a sudden change in data growth. So your team can go address that and then, replan out your infrastructure plans to account for that data growth. Oftentimes, this is also going to be a scenario where somebody accidentally backed up a bunch of photos of themselves, personal photos. So you can, help them get their own backup account and get those personal items off the business backup system. The other and the more important one is to address malware. So the way our system works is, and the way a lot of malware works, is that they'll actually change your file, or they'll rename files, and our system will pick those up as changes. So in the early days of ransomware, 2015, 2014, the encryption process for ransomware happened very slowly over a few months' time. So these warnings would actually give a warning to the administrators before the ransomware had actually triggered, giving admins a nice head start on a recovery and before it had encrypted everything. Today, the ransomware encryption happens very quickly. So now it's no longer the strategy of slowly encrypting over a long period of time, but as soon as they gain access to certain parts of your network, boom, they just encrypt everything within about 45 minutes. This can help you, in that scenario, this helps you identify where things started, where things ended. So as you go through your digital forensic process to, figure out how was our network penetrated, what do we need to do to recover and to protect ourselves to make sure it doesn't happen again, this anomaly detection warning system will point you at the machines and the times at which these anomalies occurred. And along the lines of security, we've always boasted security as a top priority. And from the beginning of Infrascale, we've encrypted the data before it leaves the machine, and then we transfer the data over encrypted tunnels, and the data remains encrypted at rest. this is not so common in the industry. Typically, you find, especially if you're looking at just software as a service file backup systems, they may not do any encryption on site, and they only have an encrypted tunnel through which they're sending information, or they decrypt the data once it gets to the server, which is another big thing when you're talking about like, well, why can't we just use Google Drive or OneDrive or these things for backup? It's because a backup, by definition, is not a production use. So those systems don't encrypt the data on the server because they expect you to modify the data while it's on that server. That's the benefit of using those systems, and I use them all the time. But it's not a backup. One bag sync algorithm, and you've lost all your data. How do you get it back? They don't have the retention policies as part of that service to give you the level of comfort knowing that you're not going to lose data or not endure downtime. So even if you're using those nice file sharing and sync tools, those are not backup tools just because they're not on your computer or on your server. Some of the compliance that we adhere to or that we support is HIPAA compliance for healthcare and medical, SSAE 16, which replaced SAS 70 a few years back, FINRA, Sarbanes-Oxley, CGIS compliance, and of course GDPR for those of you that are internationally operated, or for those of you seeing that similar GDPR policies are going to be coming stateside soon. We've implemented those rules for everyone. A little bit about Infrascale. So again, our mission is two-part: eradicate downtime and data loss. They're two different problems to solve for. Downtime is how quickly can you get back up and running, and statistically, businesses that don't resume operations within 3 days of going down have an 80% chance of failing now, and that's within the next year. So, managing downtime is very expensive, and it's very important. Data loss is answering the question of, can we get it back? So nothing about speed, just is it going to be there when we need it? So we have these two parts as part of a full business continuity and data protection solution, as both are very important, even though they have different needs. We have about 1,000 partners globally, and these partners help us deliver the services and implement, deploy. They can even supplement your own IT team just for this particular project, for example. So just give us a call and we can find somebody in your area to work with if that's what you're interested in. We have data centers all over the world. So we have multiple data centers in the United States. Data centers can be set up for any reason, whether it's specific compliance. For example, our CGIS compliant data center is separate from the rest of our infrastructure for compliance reasons. We have data centers in the UK and Germany, South America, Central America, all over North America, Canada, and the United States, so that you can still maintain those geographic sovereignty laws that a lot of us adhere to, especially in finance, healthcare, et cetera. The big accolade we got last year was we were named by Gartner as a leader in the disaster recovery as a service space. And this was huge for us because compared to these vendors, it's kind of a David and Goliath story. We're, somewhat of a startup company, and going up against and being put next to companies like IBM is really important. And one of the big reasons we've been able to do that is because, again, we don't push hardware, we push software. And by leveraging our expertise in cloud technology, we've been able to break open a market that was traditionally cost prohibitive for any non-enterprise company to get into by using that expertise in cloud software to make it affordable. So you don't have to buy hardware. You don't have to maintain that hardware. We're going to give you that recovery environment, and that's all wrapped up in a part of the service. So we have some good questions coming through, and we're going to get to those in just a minute. We're almost at the end. We have over 1 million devices protected. So here's a little heat map of where we're protecting information all over the place. And again, the full business solution. So whether it's a hybrid environment, physical, virtual, Linux, Windows, Mac. We can protect everything on site, and then we can replicate either to our cloud, your cloud, or some other public cloud. And all of that, again, replicating to the Infrascale cloud with that 15-minute guarantee, which you just don't find elsewhere. And that's very important when you're looking at your business continuity solution, is bringing peace of mind to your executive team that, the only problems they have to worry about are the problems in their department. They don't have to worry about their infrastructure ruining the good work that they're trying to do. And I think that'll finish it up, and then that'll take us to our poll question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Derek. Yeah, if you guys wouldn't mind taking a moment and answering the poll question, we'd really appreciate your support on that. And while you're doing that, I'm going to start the Q&A. So if you have a question, please feel free to submit it. And Derek, here's your first question: are you HIPAA compliant?
Yes, we support HIPAA compliance. So if you're a medical office, small agency, big hospital, we have customers of all types, and you can use our service. And we meet that through both the encryption that we use and the way that we store and manage data, our access controls on the back end, and of course, we'll sign your BAA agreement.
Okay. How about, do you protect physical and virtual servers?
Absolutely. So for VMware and Hyper-V, you would connect to your host, and it will automatically detect and pull in any machines that you want. And you can set up automated workflows so that any new machines that get added to your virtual environment automatically get a default backup policy and replication policy, so that you can remove that step every time you add or remove an employee. For physical machines, it's not automated, but you would see it on your network. So there's an auto discovery function, and then it would push out what we call a client, which is the combination of a machine, a schedule, and a retention policy. And you would define the clients for all your physical devices individually.
Very good. Here we have another question. It's what about failback orchestration? I guess they want to know some more information, possibly.
There is no failback orchestration. So the failover orchestration, our primary goal is to eliminate downtime. So the orchestration is for ending the downtime by giving you a temporary environment to run the business from. And then on failback, once your production environment's ready, you would be able to, create a quick backup and then recover those machines running in the cloud back to your production environment as you had it. But there's not the drag and drop orchestration function for that flow, as the scenario is a little more, has a bit more variable to it. But that's how failback works, is you can recover to your production environment from exactly the point that you left off in the temporary recovery space. That way you don't have to do any type of manual migration of updated databases, files, or anything like that. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, sounds good. If there's any more questions, please feel free to submit them. How about, what is your support like?
I've heard they're fantastic. We have support all over the world to account for our customer base being quite global. So we have a 24/7 support hotlines available. We have different levels of support located in different areas. For our escalated support scenarios, we actually have them located in development offices so that they have immediate access to our engineering team, which can be critical in the case of a recovery environment or just in getting any of those critical issues addressed immediately. So we've found that structuring our support teams and our engineering teams alongside each other has been a terrific strategy in in having fast turnaround and responsiveness to alerts.
Okay, thank you very much. And here's another question, and it's where are your data centers located?
All right, we have data centers in Salt Lake City, Utah. We have some in different parts of Texas, at least one in Houston. We have data centers in Toronto, Canada, and outside of London, and I believe in Belgium is where another one is, or in Frankfurt for Germany. We have some data centers in Brazil, the Bahamas. So we really have them all over the place. So if you have a geographic requirement for where the data needs to be held or stored, you just let us know, and we'll be sure to have a data center available. And because of the way that we deploy things, it's also not that long, depending on what you need, for us to set up a new location.
Oh, great. All right. Here's another question. What are the RPO and RTO?
Perfect question. So I'll just define these terms for the audience. I assume everyone knows, but restore point objective is really asking what your exposure to data loss is. So if you're backing up every hour, that's a 1 hour RPO. It means you'll never lose more than 1 hour at a time when you go to recover. RTO is restore time objective. How quickly can you recover in this scenario? The RTO for disaster recovery is 15 minutes guaranteed when replicating to our cloud for a particular machine. The RPO can be set, typically we find that our customers are setting hourly RPOs for the DR portion. For file and folder backup, also kind of the same. I find that people generally don't change data so often to have a lower RTO than that, although you may have some databases that are updating quite frequently. But talk to our staff about your RPO and RTO goals. Typically, we find that our partners and customers are setting things up with about a 1 hour RPO and 15-minute RTO for particular machines, or even less than that for individual files.
Okay, thank you so much. Derek, it looks like we answered all of the questions in the queue, so thank you for doing that. Do you have anything you want to add before I close out the event?
Yeah, we just are going to release a new version, 6.15, tomorrow, and this comes just a little more than a month after our last release, 6.14. And in these releases, if you look through the notes, which you can find on our blog, and we have webinars about them as well, one of the important things to look at when you're building out a business continuity solution, again, is the time, not just in recovery, but of complete management and monitoring. One of the big things about tape systems that made them so unreliable, I think statistically Microsoft came out with some report that they were about 50% reliable to recover data. And a lot of it had to do with just the difficulty and the time it took to manage a tape system on a day-to-day basis. If you look at what our focus is in our roadmap, it's continually reducing the time it takes to manage, building out a boot orchestration flow so it automates your recovery of an entire environment and not just an individual machine. Being able to get the reporting from tests. So we have, boot verification, where you can say, okay, I want a boot verification to be performed automatically every day or every month, and I want the report to send a screenshot to this stakeholder, whoever you're reporting to. These sorts of things, even though they're somewhat separate of the primary focus of a backup runs and then you run a recovery, it goes into the whole benefit of the system and really gives you a full solution. So I'd promote, take a look at our site, see what we've been up to lately. And I think you'll find that when you talk to our staff and start using the system, that you'll be quite pleasantly surprised that a system with this much power is actually managed and monitored with such little effort compared to what you might expect.
Very good. It was great to hear from you today, Derek. Really appreciate you taking time to be with us. And I would also like to thank the audience for joining us today. The webcast was sponsored by Infrascale and presented by Virtualization in Cloud Review. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Cheers.